Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're holding the Wyoming Water Development Commission Select Water Committee Workshop Joint Meeting, November 8th. Just to let everybody know, when you want to talk, you got to hit the button. Okay. Oh, man. I think you got to ask Brandon about that one. It is.
There is one here, is it plugged in or is this remote, right?
Got to make sure Larry gets a mic here.
I think I got something to say.
Larry Hicks.
Oh, yeah. Well, me too, I guess.
Yep.
You and I talk.
Okay, is everybody all set with the mics now? Okay. Let's see. Mr. Yankee, can you do roll call for us? Here.
Shelby Dalton. Here. Commissioner Choma. Here. Commissioner Craig. Here. Commissioner Todd.
Here.
Commissioner Lawson. Here. Commissioner Little.
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner Yankee. When we start doing the introductions, I guess, the Select Water Committee does not need to do a roll call today, so if we start on this end, we'll do introductions around this way, then we'll go back to the audience.
Representative Chip Nyman, House District 1, serve on Select Water House.
Larry Hicks, Senate District 11, which is Carbon and Albany and part of Sweetwater County.
Lee Craig, Water Commissioner, Water District 3.
John Lawson, Water Commissioner, District 1. Bill Yankee, Water Development Commission, Division 3.
Mark Cott, Water Commissioner, District 4.
Sheridan Little, Wyoming Water Development Commission, Water Division 2.
Larry Suker, Water Development Commissioner, District 2.
Clinton Glick, Wyoming Water Development Commission, Wind River District.
Evan Simpson, representative from Star Valley.
Bob Choma, Water Commissioner, District 4.
John Eklund, Select Water, House District 10, that's Eastern Laramie County and part of Goshen County. Jerry Paxton, House District 47, most of South Central Wyoming.
Lisa Anselmi Dalton, I'm Commissioner at Large from Rock Springs, Wyoming.
Riley. I guess you guys can go first and then we'll do the audience. Let's see, start with Barry, I guess. Director.
Brandon Gebhardt, Director of Water Development.
David Ray, Water Development Office.
Thank y'all for coming today.
Mr. Chairman, we have some people on the line virtually.
Can you introduce yourselves online?
Yeah, this is Dan Larson up in Powell, House Rep.
This is Tim French, Senator from Senate District 18, Powell, Cody area.
This is Chad Banks, House District 17 in Sweetwater County.
Is that it? Thank you. I guess we're ready for the financial status report, or do you have anything?
No,
Prior.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we're ready to jump into the financial status report, and I'll let David Ray present that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Ray, Fiscal Manager, Water Development Office. We're in tab A of your meeting notebook today. And we're just going to quickly go over the estimated balances that are available for appropriation heading into the 2022 legislative session. So I'll start with Water Development Account 1. There's $33,852,642 estimated available to appropriate out of Account 1. I would like to note a footnote there that is after deducting the estimated non-project appropriations out of Account 1. So there are a number of other state agencies funding initiatives that are funded out of Water Development Account 1. When we did prepare that point in time estimate, that was prior to those agencies working on their 23-24 budget request. So those numbers may change a little bit, but the numbers are at the bottom of the table here for your reference. So our match for the DWSRF program with the Office of State Lands and Investments, that's $1,152,779. The Department of Agriculture, water quality funding, $656,008. These are biennial numbers as well for 2 years.
Okay.
State Engineers Office, Interstate Streams Program, $116,191. State Engineers Office Board of Control, $14,349,701. Again, that's a biennial figure. And then our estimated agency administration budget, which at this point in time was $8,098,333. But I will say that came in a little bit lower when we prepared our budget request that we presented in front of the governor's office. So moving on to Water Development Account 2. There's an estimated balance available for appropriation of $13,260,730. And then finally, moving on to Water Development Account 3, an estimated balance available of $32,766,286. Now, after that first page, there is the detailed breakdown of each fiscal projection. We went over that in August, so I'm not going to go through that line by line here today, but it's in there for your reference. There's also a trend line that shows a 10-year history of our estimated balances available for appropriation by account. So you can see over the last 10 years how that's trended. And then the last sheet is a reconciliation sheet just to show how we arrived at those numbers for each account. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I like your the way you do your presentation for your finances. It's real. You can understand it in a better way than like some places, you know, they do their finances. You can't understand. I mean, it's kind of jumbled up, but you do a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I'd just add to that we'll be talking later today, particularly in account 2, we had a projection of about $13.3 million for the biennium. You'll see as we talk through some of these applications that the requests on account 2 far exceed what we're able to fund. So we will be talking about some of the resolutions that we made with working with sponsors and ultimately what our recommendation is. But even after all of that, we're still short in account two. So we'll be talking in more depth about a proposal or a recommendation to transfer from water development account one to account two. We did this last year as well. For right now, the numbers are working out the way we see it, so that we're transferring from account one to account two rather than Buffalo Bill at this time. Perhaps next year, if we need to, we can look at Buffalo Bill a little more, but for now, we're just dealing with the two accounts that we have in front of us right now.
Thank you. Are you gonna move on to the?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. The next portion and the remainder of the workshop is to talk preliminarily about some of the projects where we've made work with the sponsors to come to terms with them to reduce the impact on our accounts this year. And then some additional projects that we're recommending that may be a little bit out of the normal, and we just wanted to put this on your radar and have a discussion today. Let you guys think about it before we make any formal action. So that's the reason for the remainder of the workshop, at least with the information that I have. So, Mr. Chairman, the first one, and I will note that each of you have two notebooks. We've got a meeting notebook and the applications or the recommendations notebook. So a lot of what we're talking about will be in the recommendation handbook. And we'll start off under tab B in the recommendation notebook. And this is a request to appropriate more money into the account 3 sponsors contingency fund. It was either last year or the year before that this was set up. Last year, this account was set up. We took money out of water development account 3 and put it into the sponsor contingency fund. That basically just appropriates money that we're able to use to address change orders and project changes in the middle of a dam and reservoir project. But it also can be used to supplement an appropriation when a bid comes in high. So rather than waiting for the next commission meeting and then having to go through the legislative process to appropriate money for a project, we can use this fund to keep the project going, reducing liability for claims and change orders and that sort of thing, and also meeting the bid deadlines and contract requirements when projects are bidding. So our ask this year is to add another $10 million to that account. We currently have a remaining balance of $9,075,000. The only thing we've taken out of this account last year was we had a discussion on Middle Piney Reservoir. And if you remember, and I believe it was, I don't remember what meeting it was, but we had some change orders that we addressed out of that $925,000 request, but that also left about 1.3 to 1.5 of that request at that time. We pulled that out. And if you remember right, we had discussions about additional grouting that would need to take place. And at that time, the decision was to pull that money out, wait till the end of this construction season and get a better handle on what we would need for the future. So we're still working through that, but there is going to be about a little over $1 million more requests for that project alone. We're also getting ready to bid Levitt Reservoir. As you all are aware, probably construction prices are going through the roof. It's a tough time to bid. We've got materials that are tough to procure, to deliver, labor shortages. For whatever the reason, the bidding climate is a mess right now. And with that project getting ready to bid, we're fearful that bids may come in high. And then we've also got other projects that will be bidding in the near future as well. Alkali Reservoir is getting ready to bid. We've got Big Sandy under construction. We've got New Fork Lake in the planning phases and EIS. So we've got a lot of things coming up in account 3 right now. So we're just asking to appropriate some of the money out of account 3 into that account. The other way we can handle it is bid the project, see what it is, and then go ask for more appropriation. Or we can ask for more appropriation and then go bid it. Take a guess at what we think we'll need. My thinking in doing it this way and putting it into account 3 is that it won't tie it up for the length of a project. It provides us flexibility without tying the money up for long term. The money's still there available for whatever we need it for. So it's just taking it out of account 3, appropriating it, making it ready for use. But it's really not impacting the long-term usability of that money. So that is our request for contingency for account 3. And I'd stop and take any questions that anybody may have or discussion on it.
Anybody else? I mean, did anybody have any questions or comments? Senator Hicks?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so what was the engineer's estimates on those reservoirs? And I certainly concur with your, estimation that we're going to see a substantial price inflation, could be as high as 10 to 20% over what the estimate was a year ago. My real concern is that 10 million may not be enough in the sponsors contingency fund, given everything that we've got going on. So
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I might have Jason come down to correct what I tell you, but I believe Levitt, the engineer's estimate was, we had appropriated 46 million for Levitt. And that should be out to bid soon. You want to talk about Alkali?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we're expecting to start advertising for bid right at the beginning of December. And then have bids are due, or the bid opening is January 11th on Levitt Reservoir. Alkali Creek Reservoir, we have 59 million currently appropriated. And we're getting close to a 60% design, so would expect a revised opinion of cost here fairly soon. But we're significantly over, I would say, on Levitt from the 46 million we have, in the order of 10 million, 10 plus million. Where the last opinion of cost was. So a lot of that's in contingency funds. 15% contingency on projects this size adds up quickly. So we'll just have to see where the bids come in.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Hicks, Zucker?
Yeah, so what we're saying is we already have some contingency in the project itself. This is additional contingency that's put in a pool for a purpose of overriding costs that are incurred, correct? But you have contingency in the contracts also. So this is above and beyond that contingency that's built into the original contract.
Mr. Chairman,
Am I right?
Chairman, that is correct.
Okay,
This pool, though, is not tied to a project where the
Right.
built-in contingency is.
this is over and above.
That's correct.
And those contingencies that are in there, are they not roughly 10% already sitting there?
15%.
15?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments or questions?
And Mr. Chairman, I might just add to that kind of our philosophy when we go into construction is we want to leave, even if we have to dip into that contingency to get it awarded, the project contingency to get it awarded, we still like to have that contingency within the project for change orders that don't exceed the appropriation amount. We may end up having to come back to, if it exceeds the appropriation amount for the project, we'll still have to come back to the contingency. But by having it in the project makes it easier for us even yet to use that money on that project.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, mister. But yeah, anybody else have any comments or questions? Director?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The next project I want to point out is not in your book. This is a late addition. It is for the Little Wind Storage Phase 1, right, Level 1, Phase 2 project. We're just wrapping up some of the work on that project, and it's a recent development, but we do have a recommendation that we'll be handing out, and we're working on getting a resolution from the Tribal Water Board for that project, and then ultimately we'll need a resolution from their business councils as well. So as that's going on, we want to make the recommendation to continue that project. With that project, when it initially started, we pulled back some of the work because the level of effort in modeling and the alternatives analysis needed more work than we anticipated when we set the project up originally. So we pulled out some of the field work to verify the preferred alternative and some of the feasibility of the project. And so what this recommendation is asking for is for 150,000 to go back out and do the field work that we had hoped to do under the Phase 2 work. So the recommendation you'll be seeing as a handout will be presented to you tomorrow, and we'll be discussing that in more depth. And that's the reason I wanted to bring that to your attention, because it was not in the book.
Mr. Chairman, if we just get a refresher on what the Little Wind project is.
So, Mr. Chairman, it's typical to our feasibility studies. We're looking in the Little Wind for potential storage sites based on the purpose and need that we're deriving from our hydrologic modeling. So, some of these areas have been studied in the past, obviously. In 2014, 15, I believe it was, we then started into a level 2 Phase 1. And in about 2017, that switched into a Phase 2. So we've narrowed down the sites to what we think is the preferred site, gone out and done some initial field work to verify wetlands and geologic mapping and things like that, just on a desktop basis to see, yeah, that looks about like 10 acres of wetlands or what have you. That's looking pretty good. We took that back to the Tribal Water Board here in the past month and get their feedback, but like Brandon said, we had to pull back on some of our field work, and we need to go back out next summer and get that done to verify that there aren't any fatal flaws with a particular site.
Mr. Chairman, what's the yield on that reservoir?
I don't have that information in my mind right now, but it's the North Fork Little Wind site is what we call it. Right now it's sized at 15,000 acre feet, but we need to do some additional refinement of that to make sure that that matches up. We kind of went through and tried to do an apples to apples comparison on the Little Wind and basically put them into the model as 15,000 acre feet on all of them. But now that we know where the shortages are that we're going to try to alleviate with that particular site, we go back and we try to figure out where's the, I guess, the optimum size based on the yield and maximize, cost per. We don't have that finalized yet. That's part of this additional work.
Thank you.
Director Gebhardt.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next thing I'd like to discuss with you today, I've mentioned it briefly, but it's the account transfer. On your project notebook tab, the second MC is the request memo, but might be easier to follow along under tab B of your meeting notebook. And there are some tables there that discuss our accounts. I'll give everybody a second to get there. So Mr. Chairman, the second page of that is our rehab account, water development account 2. And as I mentioned, the requests were much more than the money we had available. So we're we're requesting a transfer of $7 million out of Water Development Account 1 to Water Development Account 2. On the next page, you will see Account 1 and what that $7 million transfer does. Typically, so up at the upper right corner of that table is a fund balance column and a fund balance with transfer column. The fund balance is the money that we project to have for appropriation in the tune of about $33.9 million. And historically, we have tried to appropriate projects to not exceed half of that amount in a given year, because that is a biennial number. So we've got $33 million for 2 years. So by running through this, with all the project requests, our funding recommendations, without the transfer, we would have about $23.5 million remaining. With the $7 million transfer, that takes it down to about 16.4 million, which is roughly half. So that's why we felt comfortable with the $7 million transfer request at this time. Now, if you go back to the previous page, it's a very similar table. You can see that we're starting off without a transfer of about 13.26 million. Under the fund balance with transfer, we have some additional numbers pulled out of the table and then inserted under that column. What we're basically saying there is that if we do not transfer this money, those projects are the ones we've identified of not funding because we can't transfer the money. And to go through that, so we would be looking at the Cottonwood Irrigation District Pipeline Replacement 2022 project. The funding request is 1.6 million. We're recommending that 1.6 million be funded, but until that transfer is done, we pulled it out and made a contingency. And we explained that on our recommendation, and it'll also be in the omnibus bill that project is contingent on the transfer. So all of those numbers, the next project under the same concept is the Dry Creek Irrigation District Pipeline Replacement 2022. The Goshen Irrigation District 29.4 Pipeline Project Phase 2 2022. The Lovell Moncor Lateral Phase 2 Rehabilitation. And then the Small Water Project Program Rehab. We'll talk about the small water. The reason we pulled that out is we have a balance of about $700,000 still in that account. We would like to increase, last year we had discussion about what we should be funding every year for the small water programs. And we kind of left that every year we'd like to ask for $1 million for small water in account 1 and about $500,000 in account 2. So that's the reason why we've requested 500,000. We still have 700 in it that I think we can fund this year, potentially, depending on the applications. But that's the reason why we made this contingent on the transfer. So those are the projects that are contingent on the transfer. However, we are still recommending those be funded, but we have to have a fallback that if something were to happen and that couldn't be transferred. That's what we're looking at. And we stuck to projects that would be in the construction bill. We used the priorities as much as we could, but we stuck to the ones that were in one bill, whether it be the planning bill or the construction bill. Our thinking is behind that if you mix and match between the planning bill and the construction bill, if something were to happen to one of those bills didn't get passed, then it creates a big headache and where does all that money go? So we left it all in the construction bill this year. The transfer will be written into the construction bill as well as the contingent projects. So those are the projects that we're looking at that would be contingent on the transfer of $7 million. And you'll see at the bottom of the second page, with the $7 million transfer for next year, we would only have about $1.9 million for projects next year. So next year we'd be looking at seeing what the recommendations are, but we're short of money on account 2. So I'd pause there and provide further explanation if needed or answer any questions.
Anybody have any comments or questions for Director Gebhardt?
Mr. Chairman,
Direct.
it's probably pertinent, but particularly for the select water committee members here and that are online. We're going to have a little bit of money to be expended on one-time money this year in the general fund budget. And I'm just thinking that what we may want to do is actually apply for some of the general fund money to cover the $7 million into account 1, or from account 1 into account 2. And I'd also like to look at if we have, by the time we put the water bill together, is to look at if we have any engineering estimates for Laprelle Dam, that we would also ask for construction dollars as a placeholder for that. These are one-time monies. Some of them are obligated for construction projects. I'd certainly like to see some of that money put in there. I think that's something that we'll have to work out with our staff. I think you still want to have this as a placeholder. I'm just trying to figure out at this point in time, but I'm more than receptive to the idea that, given the fact that the amount of money that's been pulled out of water development in the last 4 or 5 years with these one-time monies that'll go straight to construction project, particularly the $7 million, that we may want to take a run at that at this point in time. Anyway, I'll just throw that out there as a discussion as we start to craft the water bill. I may very well bring in an amendment to include a general fund appropriation to cover that cost. And maybe some additional funding too. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative
Senator Hicks, we appreciate the thought, and we can provide you any information we have at the time that you may need.
Representative Simpson.
Director, you indicated, Jason, that the Levitt bid was going to go out on January 11th. Bid opening, which means we're going to have hard numbers for the Levitt project prior to our next meeting. So that would also apply. If that goes over budget, we could go in one-time money instead of using up our contingency money. So I like the idea. Good.
I kind of like that idea myself. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Director Gebhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And speaking of needing some funding, oh yeah, we've got the Goshen Irrigation Tunnel rehabilitation. The request made to the commission was for a total of $44,500,000 at a 75% grant, 25% loan. That was a recommendation, or that, not the recommendation, that was the application. We have worked with, had several conversations with the district. They are here. I will provide them some time to talk to you all. But I wanted to explain the recommendation that you see under tab I in the recommendation notebook. So our recommendation accounts for several things. The first thing is the tunnels feed both lands in Wyoming and Nebraska. And I believe the ratio is 49% in Wyoming and 51% in Nebraska. So we don't feel comfortable funding Nebraska. I don't think it's legal. We could look into that more, but that's my assumption right now, that we can't fund Nebraska's portion of the project. We also looked at phasing the project because of our funding. We do think it's a good project, but we don't have the money, so we looked at phasing it. And the first phase of it is a little further alternatives analysis to determine what the preferred alternative is, and then getting into some of the design and the field work and permitting associated with that. So all in all, our recommendation of the 44.5 million is for 1.15 million, and that is $771,500 of that is a 67% grant, and then $380,000 is a loan. That's at a 67-33 per grant to loan mix. I will remind you that they asked for 75-25. Statutorily, that is the maximum that the commission can go up to. Historically, in practice, we've landed on the 67-33. I didn't want to speak for the commission, so we recommended the 67-33 grant loan mix for 49% of the design phase of the project. Mr. Chairman, I will answer any questions, but I would also offer to the district to provide any information. I believe they would like to have a handout, and I think we can share the handout to the people in virtual land as well. But if I'll answer any questions as they come down, and then I'd like to turn it over to them if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, was there any discussion, Director, of potentially 100% loan to Nebraska for their portion of it? At any interest rate, number one, can we do that? But number two, was there any discussion along those lines that we could, for Nebraska's 51%, that we could loan them whatever the percent request was with the interest and terms on that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, we will have to look into the legalities of that. From what the initial information I have is that we probably couldn't, but it's certainly worth looking into deeper.
Mr. Chair, I have one other question for Brandon. This Goshen project, it seems like it would meet some type of stimulus, federal government stimulus funding. I don't know how you get it. I don't know if it'd be quick enough, but you know, they just passed an infrastructure bill through the House, I believe, and the president's going to sign it. Is there any way to, and I don't know what the Senate will do, but would this be quick enough to apply for some type of project through that portion of those funds?
Mr.
Would it
Chairman,
work? That's my question, because it seems like they're giving money away. Apparently, it's going to be given away. Don't know how soon. And it seems like we have an interstate situation here. We have two states that both would qualify for the program. So it's just a question. Did we ever look into it? Or could we get an application and see what happens? Or where are we at?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Suker, I think you'll probably hear more on this, but that is one of the things that we've asked the district and their consultants to look into is other funding sources. And I think we'll probably hear more about that when they come down and talk to us. So that is on the radar as well. Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments or questions for Director Gebhardt? Director Gebhardt?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'll turn it over to Goshen and I'll step out of the way and
Can you please introduce yourselves again?
Yes, I am Dave Saul, President of the Goshen Irrigation District. Mike Coleman, HDR Engineering. I am the project manager for this project as it sits right now.
Bob Coxville, board member, the Goshen Irrigation District.
Thank you. You ready for your presentation? Go ahead.
Yes, so I'd like to thank all of you for hearing us out today, first and foremost. As you can see on our presentation here, we had a tremendous accident, if you could call it that, in July, when irrigation water is at the most needed point in time in Goshen County. Corn is starting to tassel and beans are needing their first water. This was just a devastating disaster. We're asking for your help as much as possible just to get us back to where we can irrigate at 100% of what we're used to. Right now, we have got water running. It's not full flow. We're not getting all the water on all of our crops that we would like to see, which is creating an economic, it's so hard for our farmers to make their payments to the banks, to just to live and to proceed the next year. So with this pamphlet, we would really like you guys to look at it and just help us with as much as possible. And any questions or anything that I can answer, I'd love to do it.
I have one question. Excuse me. You guys got turned down for that BRIC grant?
Yes. With no explanation.
That just doesn't sound right. Okay, does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I mentioned it already that, and I didn't know you were turned down for FEMA also. But if you considered another application
Yes.
to this stimulus funding that may be on the horizon.
We're hopeful in any way with the infrastructure bill that you just mentioned. Man, if we can be the first ones to ask for any of that, we want to be on board with it. With HDR's help, we are looking into all possibilities.
Yeah, because I think that's important to be shovel ready for this type of.
The sooner the better.
Yes, and like I said earlier, you have two states here concerned. You got irrigation, you got crops. I think it's a really good shot. You
Yeah.
got a good shot if you get it in there quick. Because it's gonna go pretty quick too. But they say it's gonna take a couple of years to get rid of it. I don't know about that either, but anyway, shovel ready is the best position you can be.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a question. I'm just wondering with this, the system shared fairly equally between two states, what's happening on the Nebraska end? I mean, and I'm not sure what state agencies they have that'd be analogous to Wyoming state agencies like you heard before us today, but I'm just curious how your system maybe coordinates that or what's happening on the Nebraska side of the equation.
We're in constant contact with the board for the Gearing Fort Laramie side of it. They seem to be trying their hardest to find money. I don't know if anybody wants to let you know if they're having adequate conversation with the right people, but they're trying their hardest.
I spoke with their attorney this morning and they're doing similar things. They're pulling their congressional delegation, both state and national, as it relates to the stimulus bill. They have one program that's roughly similar to this type of water development program in Wyoming. It's the Nebraska Legacy Fund. Applications are due for that, I believe, in May. and that's a June award, so it somewhat coincides with the availability, but we really just started our grassroots fundraising efforts in Nebraska, and they're targeting their senators, the head of DNR, which are their equivalent state engineer position, and then their governor's office as well.
Thank you. Senator Hicks? No, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to
Commissioner
ask
Lee,
a
Craig.
couple of questions about the delivery and capacity. Looking at the numbers, it appears that prior to the damage, you were able to deliver 1,500 CFS. Is that correct?
Correct.
And now with the repairs, you're at 1,400. Is that right?
Yes.
So you're down 100 CFS.
Yes.
But I would assume your reason for putting this application together and submitting it is not so much that 100 obviously would have an impact, but more long-term, is that correct?
Oh, long-term for sure. Right now, we are just patched. There is nothing to say that it couldn't happen again tomorrow. And until we get it fixed permanently, the risk is too high.
Representative Simpson.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for being here. I'm looking at your sheet. Whoever created the grant loan, I'm studying those numbers. Could you answer me some questions? I'm having a hard time following that. So under this 67/33 column, there's a grant amount, a loan amount, and the total cost. And if I add the grant and the loan together, that equals 22 million. I don't understand why the total cost at 4% for 50 years of 50, I can't work through that. Can you help me with that?
Marcus, you stop me if I'm wrong here, but is that not the 40-year amount?
I see. So the loan of 7 million, after 50 years of payments, it would grow to 52 million that they would contribute back. Very good. Thank you. That helps me understand that. So a follow-up question. So of the 44 million, the Director Gephardt suggested that was the total project cost. Of that, you're requesting 33 million come from Wyoming. And the staff has recommended that we fund only the design first. Is that correct? 1.1 for design only?
I think at the total cost of 44, what Commissioner Gephardt had said and what we had asked for is 49% of that, with Nebraska having to take care of the 51%.
So what is the total construction cost estimate?
As of right now, we're looking for a total construction cost of 44.5 million
44 for the entire project?
for the entire project.
And you're looking for Nebraska to fund how much?
Half of it,
Half of it.
51%.
So the 33 million requested on our sheet under tab B is not correct then. You're after half of 44, which is 22. So just trying to understand.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Simpson, which one are you looking at? What are you looking at?
I'm on tab B under I, Goshen ID Tunnel Rehabilitation. It says requested funding 33 million. Tab B, which is the rehabilitation account. Account 2.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that should be 44 million because they asked for the loan as well, but that would be 70, that would be the 67% of the 44 million. And that would assume that the loan wasn't coming from us, but in this case it is. So what I'm saying is the 33.375 million on the table really should say 44.5 million. We took out the 67% of the 44 million ask.
Gotcha.
And
Only-
that's the requested amount.
Gotcha. But technically, the requested amount, assuming Nebraska is going to come in with half of it, is 22 million.
That would be correct,
That
yes.
we're looking at for a total project cost.
If we only
loan
fund
agreement.
Wyoming's portion, it'd be around 22.
Thank
Yeah.
you. That helps me sort through that.
Apologize for that.
Mr. Chairman, I have one other question for the board, and I guess, so that's what it's gonna take to change or to get this thing back up with new construction. But what is the cost that you've already incurred that you may owe on this project also? Because didn't you do some rehabilitation? Do you own the bank? Where'd you get the funding, I guess? to do what
Yes.
you did?
So total cost of our rehabilitation right now is at just under $9 million or just at $9 million. We procured $4 million from the Bureau. And we procured $4 million from the slip board. And of all of that, we owe 1 million. Just under 1 million right now.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to ask, because I want to make sure you didn't have a $9 million debt besides the rehabilitation that you have to do to put this thing back in new condition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Eklund.
so have you determined how this thing's gonna, will it be a new tunnel? Will it be an open ditch? And how did you come up with these costs of 44 million? Curious about that. I'm also kind of curious, before you started, you were unable to deliver the amount of water that you had appropriations for, I think you, the facility itself, the tunnels and I don't know, other structures prohibited you from delivering the amount of water that you could give to the irrigators. In the new rehabilitation, will that make any difference, that part? And how is this going to be repaired or rehabilitated or rebuilt?
There's a lot there. So we do deliver from our wayland, or where we deliver from the river to our canal system, 1,500 CFS. Through ditch loss and normal evaporation, it goes down from there. The structures have, prior to collapse, delivered the water we needed. And then, I'm sorry, on your other questions.
Yeah, have you determined how you're gonna rebuild this thing? Will it be a tunnel again, or will it be a open ditch?
That I'm gonna leave a little bit to HDR here. We're in that phase right now.
Yeah, here about 2 months ago, we really got started on this and we've identified, we went through all the previous studies and offers and we really identified 4 or 5 key options to consider. And they range from open cut to lining, tunnel replacement, some hybrids for makeup water or loss capacity. But right now, at this point, this cost estimate was based on a tunnel replacement. And we have not, and we felt that was maybe one of the more expensive options so that we wouldn't have to come back and ask for more. We're hoping that through the alternative analysis, we can drive costs down through efficient engineering and construction.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hicks.
so just for clarification, so you have the catastrophic collapse in tunnel 2. Is the 44.5 million just for tunnel 2 or is it for both tunnels?
It'll be for both tunnels.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that we've done with larger projects in the past is what I would be inclined to do, knowing that you got a it's always somebody has to put their foot out there first. Would be a contingency conditioned upon the state of Nebraska coming up with a 51%. We would put up 49%, obligate those funds, could not be expended until which time the state of Nebraska or those water users were able to come up with their financing, because this is a classic chicken and the egg situation. So to try to leverage Nebraska. So is that discussion taking place? And what's your thoughts on that? If we had that money in an account, but could not be expended until Nebraska had actually obligated the funds, you think that would help expedite the process with Nebraska?
Mr. Chairman, Bob Coxville, Bush Irrigation District. I'm going to back up a little bit, give some facts. I'm not sure, just in case you folks don't know. We got a contract with the Bureau of Reclamation. Nebraska's got a contract with the Bureau of Reclamation. And here's some facts. We got a real mess on our hands here. You read them contracts, we're both liable. It's right in black and white. We got to maintain and pay for fix the tunnel, but we don't own it. But our contract in Goshen Irrigation District, it's in there black and white to read it. It's our decision how it's fixed. And Nebraska's kind of upset about that, but they're obligated to pay for half of it. So you see kind of a mess we're in. It's Wyoming's decision how it's fixed, but they got to pay for half of it. So that's kind of created a lot of problems. And I'd like to back up. Also in our contract from 1926, we got a really good contract. We're entitled to a foot to the 70 if we fix our system. I'm sure you folks are more smarter than I am, knowing the value of water. I think we ought to, I've been pushing for, let's fix this for the fullest potential. For the water we have underneath our contract, we can deliver a foot to the 70, which is more water would be just make our farms worth a tremendous amount of money, make all the Wyoming farms worth more money, but we got to fix it right. But so we're still ironing out how to fix it. So I personally am pushing for, let's fix this thing for the fullest potential that we have. And one selling point on that is I'm sure all you're familiar with Mr. Biden's 30-30 plan, right? Well, that 1/3 is water. Well, I'm sure there's some liberal, I'll be careful with politics. I'm just a farmer. If we don't show that we can use our water, I think down the day, somebody might change our contracts. If you guys have been historically using this amount of water, they might change our contract that someday we never had the potential of being able to go to the foot to 70. Because sometimes with the snow shed, we have a lot of water. Water's money. That's how we make our money, is the water. So I think we ought to fix it right, make sure we're being able to take care of all of our water. But I'm trusting Mike here. I wasn't too high because the experts have let us down this road where we're at today. We spent, the numbers gave David up to 9 billion, following the experts, and we got less water. So we've had a lot of internal fighting about the money that we spent for less water. And financially, it's been a huge detriment for all the farmers down there. We're basically, we got 75% of the water, so we had 75% of our income. Then with some modifications, we got it to 90%. And I don't know why the articles in the papers, you probably read in the record roundup, Fence Post, it said we got 97%. I'm not sure where they got that number. We did get that number. So water's our money. I'm trusting Mike and his crew to fix it right. We vetted a lot of situations. Somebody asked earlier about, Mr. Eklund asked about to fix it. I think what we vetted so far, basically, I think there's only two options. Is open cut. Got some issues there with some DEPA and trails and pipelines, but it's possible that I don't know if you folks are familiar with the Elon Musk tunnel deal. We went and talked to them. And they're the ones building the tunnels like in Las Vegas, LA. I don't know if you folks have seen that. They've got that perfected and they got it down to us. Oh, I'm not sure what words. They've got it perfected. They're very good at it. They can do up to a mile. They claim they can do a mile in like a month. That even includes mobilization. They told us, we were there personally with them, that they can do about a mile for maybe less than 10 million. And so I personally recommend that we do we call it twin tunnels. So that way we have the potential of getting this 70 down to the 70, put to the 70. Plus, another huge issue we have, I recognize Mr. Lawson there. He knows this better than I do. We had a power plant on that system back when they built it. If we develop this thing to be able to run a lot of water, a lot of that's still there. We have the potential to open that power plant up and create a source of income for the next generations to come. But to do that, we got to be able to run a lot of water. So if we fix this thing, we got to be able to have this potential for a lot of water, so nobody can change our water right. Maybe run this power plant and make our farmers more money. And that's why we're here today, to try to make Wyoming better. But we do have a real issue with Wyoming. When we visit with Wyoming, I just short quick, I'll try to quit talking here, but in my opinion, we're pretty going to have to finance this deal totally with some agreement with Nebraska and some type of loan payback. And that's my opinion. What we've talked to them, the joke is Nebraska, once you get past North Platte, it doesn't exist anymore, Western Nebraska. And so they have a real issue with money. I think Mr. Gentleman here talked about the ARP, the American Rescue Plan from the Democrat Stiggy passed. There's a lot of money there, but it's too new. A few people we talked about didn't really know the specifics of it yet, but they thought we qualify. They thought the green energy would be even easier to get for the potential of the power plant. Hopefully, I think Mr. Coleman here and his crew are investigating that. And so, sorry to talk on, but if you got any more questions, we got a real mess with our contract deal between the two states. But I promote that we fix this right, but to fix it right, it's gonna take money. We have to spread it out. That's about the end of our story, to make our farmers more money. And let me tell you folks the value of water. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Folks, there's still one piece of the puzzle that's missing for me that I hope you can provide for us. Now, the commission tomorrow during their discussion is going to have to make the decision whether or not to go with the staff's recommendation of 67% grant or your request to consider 75% grant. And you provided some data here. I'm looking under tab I in our binder, and it indicates that at the time of the catastrophe, you raised your rates from $27 per acre to $32 per acre. That was at that time. You're hoping that covers some costs.
Correct.
But what I think the commission needs, and ultimately the water committee, is what's your hard assessment numbers based on these grants? If we give you 7.3 loan or 5.5 loan, how is that going to affect your bottom line assessments? We need to know if you're asking us to go for 75% grant, we need to know that it's creating a hardship for you. And we don't know that based on the information we have.
So right now, our assessments are as high as they've ever been. And when you look at $3 corn 2 years ago, or and you're paying $30 an acre foot, it was very hard to go to the bank and ask for operating loans to pay off debts here and there. I feel that it is our job as a board for the irrigation district to keep the assessments as low as possible so the farmers have something to survive with. Water is our life down there in Goshen County, eastern Nebraska. We need we need every break we can get. And asking another $10 an acre to make it $40 an acre would drive some farmers out, which is what we do not want.
I certainly feel that. I feel your pain, but we need to know, what is your assessment going to be? Your consultant can crunch the numbers. Hopefully he's got his calculator with him. What are you projecting your assessment's going to be with this loan amount? And what's the difference between the 75% and the 67% grant? And you don't need to provide that to us now, but tomorrow, these gentlemen and ladies are going to want to know the answer to that. What, are you at $50 an acre assessment and we're giving you that break, lower it by X amount? We'd like to know those numbers before tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Very good point. This is an issue, of course, with the board. You know, we've hammered out and we never will agree. But without the water, our farms are nothing. And all the water, all the farms. So we like to keep it as low as possible. I represent a lot of farmers. If we have to get some money, any money we get from you is a blessing. But if I gotta pay another $10 an acre, I'm talking about my own family farm, and quite a few in our, if we gotta pay $10 an acre to get this done, that's a drop in the bucket to get the thing fixed if we have to pay for the whole thing. So Mr. Coleman, we'll see what he comes up with. Very good question, but we're representing David and I, and Dave, this is one thing David and I don't agree on is, I guess I'm willing to pay the money. We're about a 50-50 split. Feel like keep it as low as possible, but I guess, I think you guys, I'm talking to the choir, you folks know our farms are nothing without the water. So I guess if I gotta pay more to save my farm, I'm willing to do it. We just have to keep it as low as possible.
Sure.
Could we have him come down?
Yeah.
The people online can't hear you much.
And could you state your name again, please?
Mr. Chair, Marcus Kroll, HDR. The difference per share comes down to 652 versus 494. And we tried to illustrate on.
Could you repeat?
Yes, sir. 652 versus 494.
We'll double check it between now and tomorrow. I hate doing calculators, phone math, but we'll have something.
Sure, your maintenance, operation maintenance costs. Make sure that number we have is.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, if I could just clarify, what is in your hands represents the 49% figures. And obviously the application, when we submitted it, was for the full amount. So that was perhaps some cause of the confusion on the figures, but based upon feedback with Director Gebhardt, it was our understanding that the 49% was going to be the recommendation. And so that is how we program those costs.
Thank you for the clarification there. Representative Eklund.
I kind of hear the same thing, and I think that the ability of people to pay in Goshen County is dependent on whether their farm is paid for or not, how much they're able to pay. So you're probably right, it's about a 50-50 kind of from what the feed I get. I'm still curious how you do the negotiation with Nebraska. I can see why Wyoming kind of calls a shot since we have the tunnels in Wyoming. But I don't know, do the two boards meet jointly? And then the other part of that, you talked about $10 million a mile using this Musk system of tunneling, and you'd probably have two tunnels, I believe. How many miles of tunnel are in both of these?
There would be 1 mile so tunnel 1 is a half a mile. Okay. Tunnel 2 is about a half a mile long as well. Yeah. Okay. And to get our allocate the water we would want, it would take 2 tunnels per existing tunnel, 2 new replacement tunnels per existing tunnel. Okay. With our information that we have now.
And then on the joint, how do you negotiate with Nebraska?
We do meet jointly. We do have open conversations with their board. And they are out looking for money hopefully just as hard as we are. They are in contact with Mr. Coleman here as well. He's helping them.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
Questions for the engineers, assuming that the funds were, say, available by early next summer. What's the realistic time that this project could go to construction and be completed?
Speaking in the hypothetical,
Let's start with July 1st of 2022.
I believe that we would be in design of July 1st of 2022 and likely not feasible to have a construction project fall of 2022. Run water in 2023 and begin construction in 23 in the fall of 23 after the water's off. And depending on phasing for funding and various other reasons, we're probably thinking 23 and 24 off-season cycles finished in 25.
So under that scenario, you would bring in a contractor and do one tunnel first and then use the same contractor the next year.
Depending on the technology. So
So 2025 realistically for completion.
I believe that's a fair estimate, knowing what we know now.
All right, thank you.
Sir, did you want
If I may, of course, in our we farmers down there, this is a topic that just never stops. So you imagine where it affects us financially, how we discuss this, and we're debating every option. But some information, I don't know if HDR put this out because they're just kind of new on the deal. The previous work we've done, the holes they drilled and some of the patch up work we did at this time, Tunnel 1 has come back with pretty good tellers. And listen to you folks, earlier, your guys' money is very, very, very tight. In my opinion, Tunnel 1 is not a real urgent deal. It's 100 years old. Tunnel 2 is our problem child, which would open up the possibilities of spreading this out some. But the problem we have is the previous experts, which I have trouble with the experts that we spent this money that you asked earlier, they put some ribs in there for safety. Well, the ribs are holding water back. And, but anyway, if we could do something, get a little more water, I think Mr. Coleman and Mr. Paul are working on that now, because we are understanding that we're going to be running this for a couple of years. It'd be nice to get a little bit back to normal, to get back to somewhat our normal income. But I don't know, Mr. Coleman, have you pointed out that number one, all the drilling they did at this time, we got cores when they did the cement. The cement in Tunnel 1 has been rather good. And it's don't have that many ribs in it. But Tunnel 2 is kind of our problem child. It had some thin spots back where it caved in. After now they caved in, they did the cores. Some of it was only 2 inches thick. Of course, they drilled that in the teens by hand, and it was a lot different sandy and different conditions there. And after they got in there and started fixing it, you're kind of wondering how it stood as long as it did. And that's the one that's kind of a problem child, and but you're like to fix them for the next generations to come to the best potential. But I think maybe I just was going to point out, looks to me like from listening just today, this is going to have to be stretched out a little bit for the money.
thank you for your comment. Anybody, Commissioner Lisa and Sammy Dalton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, I'm not sure. One, you have 421 users. If they paid $1,000 each, you could pay off $421,000 a year. Just, making the numbers better sometimes by pitching in a little bit more is one thing. But then when I look at these numbers on this sheet, and I'm not sure how we got them on the pre-project and the post-project numbers on tab, on tab I, the same numbers are pre and post project, even though we're going from $27 as the assessment to 32. And then the annual payment for debt retirement stays the same when it really should be, even at the 67, 341,000. But the balance in the repair and replacement fund changes post project. I think these numbers have got to be wrong on the right side. I'm just confused by it.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Anselmi Dalton, are you looking at page 3 of the recommendation?
Yes, I'm Director. Do you see where the numbers pre-project and post-project don't change, even though the assessment goes up $5?
So my understanding on that is because pre-project, they've already started putting money aside. So the pre-project is already accounting for building up a pool of money for this.
Follow, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So you're telling me then basically they're already paying the $32 an acre assessment now to date, and But wouldn't we still post-project be paying a larger debt payment if they're estimating it at the 341,794 amount on their sheet?
Yeah, I believe, my belief was that the pre and post was kind of anticipated setting the money aside and starting. So yes, they have already started assessing the extra $5.
Go ahead.
I can clear a little bit. For us to qualify for that money that we got from the SLIB board to show proof of payment, we had to raise it $5. I think it was $4.92 is what their formula said to show that we, in there, to qualify for that SLIB money that we got, we had to raise it. So we did $5 and we did that, and that's been how long was it? 2017. So, and we do have, that is building some money.
It's almost like a pre-project number.
Hey, can you say your name on, for the record?
Sorry, this is Bill Brewer, the Deputy Director of Construction.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can you make it quick? Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to repeat that deal. We've got a contract with the Bureau for Water. Nebraska's got a contract with the Bureau for Water. Somebody asked how we get along. We have a reserve works contract is where we meet on and how we fix this canal. And that reserve works, short and sweet, is we make in our contract, usually we agree, but in our contract, we make the decision how it's fixed. And this is short and sweet if you read the contract. We send the bill to the Bureau of Reclamation. They turn around and send the bill back to Nebraska for 51%. That's a short and sweet how the contracts work.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Is it you, Commissioner Cott?
I just maybe need a clarification, and maybe I missed something in the conversation. And it's about the Nebraska-Wyoming relationship there. How close are we to coming to agreement, whether it's between the districts, the state, or some portions of both states on an agreement on this issue so we can move forward? Or what needs to be in place? How long is that going to take? Are we at square one, or are we like at near the end of that?
We're very near the end.
Okay.
With the help of HDR. They have accepted their help, and with the recommendations that we come in with, the price, how economic, just everything as it comes together, we are in agreement to get it fixed together.
And so the questions, the legal questions between the states are essentially answered. Is that
Yes,
correct?
and our governor has been in contact with theirs, and we're in contact with both of them. They know the ramifications, the seriousness of this.
So hypothetically, by July 1st of next year, we could have something hammered out on that.
I'm hoping way before then that we'll, like in the next 45 days, we will know exactly what project we're going to go with. And that way we are able to look for maybe some federal money. So we're not asking you folks for as much as we are. We're really hoping that there's some federal money out there to ease this pain.
And Nebraska would be in agreement with that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Gilbert, go ahead.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I think one point, and it went back to an earlier question about the capacity of the existing tunnel. But I'll pose a question to them to answer. I know the answer, but the repairs right now on Tunnel 1, even though they're reduced capacity, are those permanent repairs in the eyes of the Bureau of Reclamation?
And they are not. Right now, we sit as a temporary repair and is not what the Bureau recommends. We need to get to a permanent fix. Wish they would help a little more.
Mr.
Anybody
Chairman,
else have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, it's on the screen here.
Yes.
Representative. Larson, go ahead.
Yes, I had a question on the capacity if I heard the original was 1,500 CFS and they're at 1,400 CFS now. And if they did the two tunnels side by side, is the capacity still the same?
If we do the two tunnels.
At 1,500.
If we do the two tunnels that we have been talked about with Elon Musk's, the boring company is what it's called, we would be able to run more than 1,500.
Okay, I just would like to know that. That's good for you to have a bigger tunnel and more capacity, but I'm not sure if that is what I would want to pay for. I could go with the original size, but if you're wanting to go bigger, I think that brings in another issue.
So their boring machine itself is set to a certain diameter. And one tunnel would not be enough to get us the full 1,500. So an additional tunnel next to it with the same cast and die of boring machine is why we needed to have two tunnels.
Mr. Chairman, just kind of along those lines, it's not a foregone conclusion that Elon Musk or his tunnel would ever get it. We have a standard process to put out an RFP and accept bids. And so I wouldn't go with the assumption that necessarily at this point in time, I don't even know if the engineers have concurred with that at this point in time. I think that's pre-decisional. I just know the capacity of a minimum of 1,500 CFS.
Right.
And so just caution you about throwing out names and two tunnels and all of that stuff. At this point, this time in the game, I don't think it helps your argument.
Correct.
And Mr. Chairman, that is one of the requests that the office has made in these conversations is we would like the full alternatives analysis. Just so we can confirm that whatever the end solution is been vetted. We haven't made a determination that one is the preferred alternative at this point, in my mind.
Thank you. Should we move on now? Director? Yeah,
Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
thank you for coming and presenting. Director Gebhardt, can you, when somebody's online, can you tell me their name? When they're requesting to speak?
Yeah, if I could see him, I certainly will. Might be best if you're online to just speak up and we'll try to listen for you. What's that? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, moving on, the next one is a rather quick one. Under tab K of the recommendation notebook, we received an application for interstate irrigation and reservoir irrigation district improvements phase 2. We've had some communication with them. We have 2 active appropriations with the irrigation district currently. And the original thought was that by the time they made this application, that the work would be complete and they would be ready to move on to the next phase of the project. They've been delayed by one reason or another. I believe easements have slowed them down a little bit. But we had a conversation with them and asked them what the likelihood of them being ready to go to construction under this appropriation. And they didn't feel like they would be ready to go to construction in time to use this application before we would have another chance to come before you next year. So they are withdrawing, and I believe we received a letter from them that they are withdrawing this application for consideration until next year.
Is that, we don't have to agree to like,
No, Mr. Chairman. In fact, I think it'll probably just end up being mute if you accept our recommendation of do not fund this year, this cycle.
okay, thank you. Senator Hicks.
Because the matching funds of this were salinity control program funds. Is there another project in Wyoming that we could reallocate those to? Or do they sit there or they now go to another state?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but the basin states, I'll let you answer, Bill. Go ahead.
Basin States has agreed to hold that money available for them when they come in next year.
Reduce the percentage of funding available to the state of Wyoming through that program. No.
It should not. It was already committed. So they committed their funding to the entire project. We needed to split it up into phases to afford our share, the Wyoming share. So it's already been committed. And no, I believe there's still sufficient funds out there available in Basin States to use for other projects at this time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Director Gebhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next project I'd like to discuss is the Laramie Valley Irrigation District Diversion Structure 2020 project. It's under tab MC of the recommendation notebook. And what has happened on this project, Mr. Chairman, we appropriated money in 2020 to replace a diversion structure. They began the design of it, and as they were doing the design, they found more and more issues with the structure that was proposed at that time. Sinkholes developed, additional information provided mostly via LiDAR topographic mapping, identified other potential areas where the structure in its current place would cause overtopping and basically rerouting around the diversion structure at that location. So the district worked with NRCS and looked at a couple of things. And ultimately what they've asked is to, rather than reconstruct the existing diversion, they believe that the best alternative is to move the diversion to a new location further upstream and build a canal. Our office went out, walked the site with the district, looked at things. We don't have a problem with the new location. So what they have asked is for a replacement project, essentially, rather than reconstructing the existing diversion because of all the problems they found, they want to redesign a new structure further upstream. And their request is basically the difference of what their estimated cost for a new structure is versus the appropriation. And our recommendation is in line with that. And one thing that I did explain to them is they have already spent some money on the design of the existing facility. By the approach that we're recommending, by only looking at the difference of the total cost of the new versus the total cost of what was appropriated, the money that they have spent would already be on them. They would have to make up that difference. So we're not paying for the engineering twice on that. The district is responsible for essentially what has been paid to the design currently. And I believe that follows criteria, and I feel comfortable that that's okay. I do know that the district here, if they would like to add anything, or if you have any questions for them, but that is essentially what's going on with this project. We're not asking for a new appropriation. We're asking to amend the existing appropriation. And then this would allow them to move the structure upstream to what they feel is a more suitable location to eliminate some of the overflow and potential bypass around the structure, as well as eliminate the area where the sinkholes were occurring. And then the original plan was not to redevelop a lot of the headgate components off the diversion, which is where they're seeing the problems. So the new design would bypass that and eliminate that concern as well. So that recommendation is for an additional $700,000 to that existing appropriation.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson.
Go ahead, Representative Larson.
Yes, I guess I have a question. Have they been in contact with the state engineer's office for change in point of diversion and that sort of stuff? Is that look like it's feasible?
Please state your name too. Please.
Hi, my name is Kevin Carrico. I'm with the Laramie Valley Municipal Irrigation District. And we have had preliminary discussions with the state engineer's office, and essentially, as long as everybody is on board with, everybody in the district is on board with the change to the new point of diversion, that should be a very simplified and straightforward process as we understand it with the state engineer's office.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hicks.
couple questions. First one, Director, did this go through a level 1, level 2 study through the program? And if it did, why wasn't one of the alternatives looked at to move the point of diversion? Particularly in light of the hydrology that you've described as the hydraulic head would.
Mr. Chairman, yes, it was a level 1. The request at that time, as I understand it, was the desire was just to replace what was there. And so the scope of services that we developed was pretty focused just on that. And really where the hydrology concerns, they're further upstream than was really analyzed in the level 1 of just replacing it. So we found that the potential for blowout was further upstream. The original plan in the level 1 did look at the localized blowout potential, but we did find that there was more upstream as we developed more LiDAR.
And Mr. Chairman, so along those lines, we've experienced the same issue over and over again. So you've got a diversion structure that's accumulated sediment for the last 70 to 100 years. It's filled in the whole channel back up there. So as it backs up, you have a higher potential of a flood to jump out and flank the structure. And it's just something I think as we go into these level 1 studies, looking at to rehabilitate a structure, because you got down cutting downstream and you've got a grading stream channel upstream, which creates a lot of hydraulic problems upstream for the channel. And I would just say it moving forward on these type of studies, we need to make sure that that's always an alternative that's looked at, because this is not unique. It's a reoccurring problem everywhere we go around the state of Wyoming to start looking at these, particularly these older diversion structures on high sediment carrying streams. So the reason I ask is I would expect this not to happen again with one of our level 1 studies.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, point taken, and we have had those conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Larry Super.
the rough distance between the old structure and potential new site, what is that
It's about 1.1 miles.
really? So does it allows everybody to get water off of that, even up from that point?
So the way that this district is structured, the actual diversion structure and the first roughly 3/4 of a mile of the irrigation ditch don't feed the district. So we have to get further into in from the river before we get to the district. So this would just move it further.
Yeah, so there's nobody left out. is what I'm
Correct.
saying. All right, thank you.
I have one question myself. So that level 1 study better assisted NRCS to come up with their recommendation to move upstream. Is that true?
The amended level 2 study did.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I just wanted to show that our studies are used in other places for different engineers and throughout NRCS and BOR, stuff like that. Anybody else have any other questions or
Yes,
comments?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson.
Go ahead, Representative.
I don't see in their proposal, what kind of flow is the ditch hold and the structure? What kind of flow are we looking at?
It's 130 CFS.
Anybody else have any other comments or questions? Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for your time and your consideration tomorrow.
Sure. Director Gebhardt.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got 3 other projects that I'd like to discuss. I don't know if you'd like to take a short break now.
We'll take a short 10-minute break. We'll come back at
3:45.
3:45. Thanks. Shut this off, right?
Mr. Chairman, are we going? Because we can't hear you up here.
Same on this end as well. I was just looking to make sure it wasn't my computer.
I was wondering.
He could hear us. I mean, he can't hear us. We can hear him.
Must be the mic that's messed up, huh?
We could hear some of that right there.
Okay, can you hear us, Representative Larson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, test your. Can you test
We're
your
ready to
mic?
go. I'll kind of shortly restart again, Mr. Chairman. Under tab P, the recommendation notebook.
Make sure he can hear you.
Representative Larson, can you hear us?
Yeah, if you could get the mic a little closer, we can. Yes,
How is that?
that's good. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, here we go.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the next project under tab P of the recommendation notebook. This is a project that the Water Development Commission is bringing forward, our office, excuse me, is bringing forward as a suggestion to look at aging irrigation infrastructure around the state. The concept of this study is to ultimately develop an ongoing program to address aging infrastructure, develop prioritized projects, and then work on funding and funding partnerships to address the priority projects, encourage and help entities secure outside funding, and ultimately advance these projects to some version of a level 3 project. And the concept with this is initially to do a phase 1 project. And the phase 1 of this would be, we would develop kind of a skeletonized scope of services. And then we would get a consultant on board to help us really dive down and dig into what we would be looking at. We would start with looking at what kind of criteria would we need to look at? How would the evaluations go? And where would we do the evaluations? Doing some outreach to work with all the owners of these facilities. You know, for example, the Bureau of Reclamation has a lot of these facilities around the state. And so we would have to determine what they would be willing to participate in, whether they want us looking at this or not. So rather than phase two then would go out and really start looking, diving a little deeper into these and sites to really go out and look at and carry those on into the next level of development, whether that be a feasibility study or to construction. But ultimately, it's a statewide assessment where we're comparing a structure in this part of the state versus a structure at this part of the state. And it's more of a proactive approach than waiting for a sponsor to come to us and say, hey, I have a problem. We're trying to go out and help them determine if they have a problem or not. A lot of times they don't even know they have a problem and they're not out looking at it. So that's really the concept behind this. And it'll be a phase approach, and it's likely to be an ongoing program, if you will. But this first phase, we're asking for about $500,000 to do as much as we can. We don't know what that is yet, but we do know it's a big ask and it's a big tackle. So that is this recommendation in this conceptual program. And I'll stop and try to answer any questions.
Lost everybody. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, we lost you guys again on the sound. We have the picture. I'm sorry.
Representative Larson, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, Director.
Did you hear a phone ringing?
I did.
Okay, we just need to talk a little closer to the microphone then.
Just curious as what your thoughts are, is do we prioritize on this first go around, just looking at diversion structures or main stem canals? You know, head gate aperture works to the head gates. How would that work within? And you think about what the priorities for the program are for the rehab. Obviously, we probably don't want to start at the lowest priority. So what's your thoughts on how that would work?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, that's a great question. And the way that I have it envisioned in my mind is the first thing we need to do is define criticality, whether that is number of acres served or economic impact or whatever it is. But you're exactly right. We're not going to go out and look at everything. We're going to go out and define criticality. And then we're going to go figure out what structures meet that definition of criticality and then start honing in on that. So initially it would be the larger, I would envision dams and diversions, the main source of supply for the district. It could be a canal hanging on a shelf off a mountain, but typically we're probably looking at the structures that if it were to fail, it takes a long time to replace them and people are out of water for a long time. It's not something that you just run out and push some dirt up and away you go again. It's something that failure means is more critical.
And then, Mr. Chairman, if I can follow up second question, because this would be a state-sponsored project rather than an entity-sponsored project. So under that scenario, typically the only people are eligible is if you're a subdivision of state government, because we have a lot of irrigation out there that doesn't necessarily qualify under that scenario? Would this be then all irrigation and ditch companies that could be incorporated into this study? Because now it is a state-funded entity. We don't really need a sponsor, right?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as far as I'm concerned, we could look at anybody as long as the statutes allow it. I would also say that, I'm trying not to upset people, but this is initially looking at the larger facilities. My opinion is that the smaller facilities that aren't nearly as financially burdensome to the state, we can handle through our existing projects. But this is probably looking at the larger facilities around the state. And then if this program develops, then ultimately, I'd like to start checking off those larger ones. And as we do that, we move into the smaller facilities and continue down until we are looking at more and more and more. But this first initial blush is just to get our arms around the issue of the state and start looking at picking off some of what could potentially be the next big ticket items and start addressing those before they become a failure.
Representative
Nyman.
Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Director, how did you come up with $500,000? And I mean, what kind of a number of people would be involved in this? And I mean, just curiosity is how that figure came about and how you came about justifying that to start up.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. That's a great question. $500,000, I think, is for what I envision this program to be is small. The reason I came with 500,000 for this recommendation is because I looked at all the requests we have and their available funding. If I were to ask for federal money to do this, I would ask for up to $1 million. I think this is a big task, and we could ultimately get into conceptual designs for certain facilities, top priority. But my intent right now is to start somewhere. We haven't done anything like this before, so 500,000 gets us going, and we will likely be coming back for more requests as we get further down. But if we can get this phase one developed and kind of iron out the program, I think that will inform what we need moving forward. And it's all going to depend on what we find also. If we only find a couple of structures, it's not that big of a program. But I have a feeling that there's a lot of need out there that we're just trying to get our arms wrapped around what the funding is going to be in the future. But right now, it's, pardon my French, but it's all swag right now.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Suker.
Director Givart, just a couple of notes. We mailed out a survey. And where did we get the survey list that we mailed out? Did we get it from the Secretary of State? If that's where they're registered? Where did we get it?
Mr. Chairman, the list that we sent out is the list of our database of all of the irrigation districts that we know of in our database, and we distributed that back out to that entire list. So this is part of our biannual survey for irrigation facilities. And I believe it was 177 entities that we submitted it to. I think Mike Robertson presented the results of that study at our August meeting. But in the next 0 to 5 years, the results of the respondents was in the tune of 140,000 or $140 million worth of need in the next 5 years, based on that survey. And that was about a 50%-ish respondent rate, but it also a significant number of the larger Senator Hicks, we have discussed that, and one of the differences I think that we have is I don't want to. They have their own rules that they need to follow as far as their program does, and I don't want to step on that. It's the same with the Bureau of Reclamation. They've got their own inspections, and it's possible that they may not want us in this study going out and looking at their stuff. And that's completely fine. But what that line is, I don't know exactly what that is yet. It's something that we will work out with them. But on the converse side, then though, is if it's something that we can coordinate with them and we can help fulfill some of their duties with this study, we'll certainly do that. But it is part of the communication, the coordination of phase one that we'll be looking at that.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments for Director Gebhardt? Anybody online? I don't know, because I didn't know if they could hear me or not.
Representative Larson, can you hear us?
I can now. We had lost you for a couple minutes a bit ago. I wonder if it's when we get two mics on or something. But we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, well, we can move forward then, Director Gebhardt.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last two projects that I'd like to have a discussion with involve cloud seeding. The first one is the ground-based cloud seeding program for the winds under tab S as in Sam. And we are offering a little bit of an expansion to this. And I will let our program manager, Julie Gonzar, inform you as to what this recommendation is.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Julie Gonzar, Project Manager. As Director Gebhardt said, tab S is what you should be looking at. And this is our cloud seeding program for the Wind River and Sierra Madre Mountain Ranges for the water year of 2023 or the winter of 2022-23. As you may know, we are on the 8th year now of seeding in the Wind River Mountain Ranges. This recommendation is to acquire funding for 37% of the total project budget, asking for $316,000, which includes a project expansion. And if you look on pages 2 to 3, page 2, there's two options here that we wanted to highlight. Page 2 shows the amount needed to run the program, to run our operational program without any project expansions, so without any growth. Page 3 shows kind of a breakdown and the recommended funding request for expanding the program. A couple different ways that we would like to expand. The first is to add a new target area, the Sierra Madre Mountains. On page 3 in the table, you'll see that we would like to install 2 additional ground-based generators on the west slope of the Sierra Madre Mountains. And the table shows the total additional cost. And then since this is a cost share project, what the Wyoming cost would be at 37%, and then the additional cost for other funding partners. We do have our longstanding relationship with the lower basin entities on this project, as well as other local funding partners like the Trona mining industry. The other expansion and growth that we would like to do is add 2 weeks on the season. Add a week ahead and add a week at the end of the season. Typically, we run our operations for this project between November 15th and April 15th. So we're proposing extending it 1 week ahead early in November and extend it 1 week. So I think I have here in that paragraph, it would be approximately November 7th through April 22nd. So just an additional week on either end of the season. So the increase does include inflation. But it's primarily installing and running 2 generators. And if we did that, the installation costs would drop off in future years, and then adding those 2 weeks. This would actually allow us to run a hybrid program over the Sierra Madres, because we currently have an aerial cloud seeding operation over this mountain range as well. And that is a recommendation that will be presented on Wednesday as well. So it would be really great to have that type of ideal project, to have ground-based generators and an aircraft. So this recommendation is just adding in those 2 generators. I think I had one more thing to mention. I think that was it. Sure. So in 2018, our agency was a signatory on the Colorado River Basin Weather Modification Programmatic Funding Agreement, where we have entered, along with the other upper basin states, Colorado and Utah, with an agreement with the lower basin states for them to provide funding for our program and allow us the opportunity to grow. So ever since the pilot study and our 10-year research, we've had the lower basin partners on our side for helping us to fund this project. And so this continues to be a cost share. And part of that agreement is that every year when we ask for funding from the lower basin and submit our proposal for what we would like to do, we are allowed to ask for additional funding to grow the program. So by growing this program and it being a cost share, I think it's a great opportunity to step out and, expand, because we have their support, or we hope that we do when we go to present this.
Mr. Chairman, I would add that the reason that we are looking at a ground-based for the Sierra Madre in our Wind River study is that the lower basin contributors are more comfortable funding ground-based generators than they are the aerial. And so to do the hybrid in the Sierras, this was the best way to get as much participation from other funding sources as we could with adding the generators to the Sierra Madre Mountains.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
I do. I have a couple.
Commissioner Suker?
One is, the total of your cloud savings is $839. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So that is the
That's our
proposed.
proportionate share?
I'm sorry?
Is that just our proportionate share?
No, that is the total project budget for the entire project. 37% of that would be the Wyoming contribution, 310,000. Do you see that number there?
839,000. That's what we're looking for the total project.
With expansions,
Two
yes.
things. Do you have any proof that this works?
So that's actually the next recommendation that we would like to talk about. We're proposing a cost benefit evaluation specifically for the Medicine Bow and the Sierra Madres, but for the Wind River Mountains, the University of Wyoming is actually continuing to work on some research to determine additional stream flow in this basin from our project. So we're hoping to have some, more results from their study in the next, hopefully, year or so.
Because in my opinion, it'd be really hard to guess Mother Nature, really hard. But I have another question. Have you requested any additional funding for the lower?
Mr. Chairman.
I mean, this, in my opinion, with the way I see the water and the dams and the reservoirs that I have seen down there, they're in trouble. This should be, if it works, if you're Scientology or whatever you got into the thing of science, if it's working, this should be multiplied by a great amount in increase in funds an increase in seeding if it can be seeded with the value. That's my opinion. And have we requested from those lower states? I'm not talking about the top. See, I'm talking the ones that are critically in need. They're dry.
Mr. Chairman, yes, so I agree with you. We have, this is a two-part answer too. Since we did that pilot study and all of the other siting and design studies, there's been enough confidence in this technology to continue these operations in the state of Wyoming, and other states have also really advanced the science, or I shouldn't say other states, other researchers, this science has really come a long way. So the confidence in using cloud seeding for this purpose, for additional stream flow, the confidence is high. Every year, when we go to the lower basin entities, we ask for more money every year because of increased costs and just the way that our project costs with inflation. And we ask every year for additional money, and they honor it every time. And we also have other local funding partners that help with that contribution as well every year, like the Trona mining industry, Rocky Mountain Power, Green River Sweetwater, Rock Springs, I have that backwards, Joint Waters, Power Board. So, but when we do go to the lower basin, they honor what we ask for. I have asked for additional money to grow the program in small ways, and they have not, because I've asked for aircraft flights, and they would rather fund ground-based operations than aircraft at this time.
Well, ground is a lot more economical too, isn't it?
Mr. Chairman,
Other than
for
flights
this
and-
mountain range, it's a good option. But with our airborne program, we already have a plane flying over that mountain. Aircraft can seed different types of opportunities. Ground generators can capture opportunities that aircraft cannot. So having two ground-based generators in this potentially new target area, we could capture more storms than what we may be capturing with our aerial program.
Do you also consider drought years more seeding than other years with just a regular amount that you dedicate out?
Generally, it's a regular amount that we dedicate for the program. We have the ability to seed more in a wet year, and unfortunately, you can't seed as often in a dry year, but that's why the consistency is so important.
What I see is this number should be multiplied by 2. I mean, that's how I see it. Water is so critical for what's happening down there. I don't know how long the drought's going to last. I don't know how long the snowpack is going to be there. It's critical.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may
It's
add,
seriously critical.
if I may add, that's one of the reasons we would like to expand the season by 2 weeks. Over the past, well, we've been doing this program for 8 years now, but over the past 2 or 3 years, we've asked our meteorologists to make note of how many events we could seed before and after our timeframe. And there's 2 or 3, depending on the, on the year, that we're missing because we have to commit to starting on November 15th. So by extending it a week on the front and the back, we hope to capture a few more storms depending on what the temperatures are.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Julie, I'm convinced it's a very successful program. Idaho Power cloud seeds the range right above my house, and I curse them every time I'm out shoveling snow. Every single day a snowstorm comes in. I think it's very effective. For the commission members, you might be interested to know that this is when we put together the omnibus bill, cloud seeding is always the most controversial. We get a lot more questions over that one, and because it's very difficult to prove it because you don't know what Mother Nature would have done versus what we can do. And so it's difficult to measure it. But It is effective and it works. Julie, because you're expanding the program, members of the legislature would appreciate just a quick one-sheeter before we go into the legislature of some facts that we could use to support the increased revenue. That'd really be helpful for us, just a little cheat sheet for us to debate with. Appreciate that.
Commissioner Anselmi Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Julie, thanks for the presentation. I liked the one we had before too on cloud seeding. They did a great job explaining how it worked. The one question I know it came up before, and I just wanted to ask it again, since it does involve the Trona Mines and Rocky Mountain Power, the funding they give is not taken out anywhere in this budget at all, but there is that funding given. How do you guys account for that after I forgot? I apologize.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to do my best to explain because it is a little bit complicated. And Director, if I get it wrong, please interrupt. So because this is a cost share, it has to do with the timeline too, of when we're able to get funding. So when we go to the lower basin and ask for funding, we have to submit a proposal in June, and then we don't know if we're going to get the funding until late August sometimes. By that point, some of our local funding partners have not fully made commitments yet on whether or not they're going to contribute and how much. And it's really my responsibility too to try to get those commitments a little bit earlier in the year. But when we ask for funding from the lower basin, we ask for the full 63%, because technically, if we get any additional money outside of that percent, we can't use it for our project. So it ends up being a refund to the lower basin because they gave us the full 63%. And if we get 20,000 from the Trona Mines, we want to be able to use that money for the project. So because we're capped by that percentage and that cost share, it ends up being a refund to the lower basin. So we can make sure to use the local funding partner money. Does that make sense?
So we're not giving it back to Wyoming, we're giving it back to the other states?
Well, it's because 63% of the project cost has to come from other funding partners, other water users.
Are the follow-up chair, Mr. Chair, are the Trona Mines aware that their money is basically going to help the other states, or they're just happy to be doing it? Couldn't they give a year before and have it go into the funding model for Wyoming as part of our 37%? So we're not helping out Colorado, and I just don't think that they'd want to do that, but maybe I'm wrong.
Mr. Chairman, I think the issue that I see has just been the fact that with additional money from local funding partners, we can't always use that to go above and beyond the project budget because of the way that the legislation is written. We can't exceed those percentages. So when we get additional money from other, water users, we can't go above and beyond the 63%.
I don't know, Director Gephardt, maybe you can explain that to
Yeah,
us.
I will try. Julie's much more depth at this than I am, but the cap of the 37%, that's the state of Wyoming's contribution to the program. And so we're trying to get the biggest program we can. And so we go out and find all these other additional funding partners, including the Trona Mines. And so they are all in that 63%. So we do have some of the in-state people in that 63%, with the concept that the maximum we can go is 37%, and we want as big a program as we can get. So that's how we come up to the total operations budget, by going out and finding all those partners and then funding the 37% that the state is allowed to fund.
So, Mr. Chairman, is this something where, Director, that the legislature, our legislature would have to change the legislation to allow that the Wyoming funds to go straight to the Wyoming percentage? Is it that Senator Hicks has to get busy and do something?
Mr. Chairman, that's
Senator
pretty
Hicks.
easy. Only thing we have to do is insert a sentence that Wyoming shall not contribute more than 37%, which leaves the total project cost, whatever that is. So it's just add one sentence there. Our contribution shall not exceed 37%. So if you get more, actually our contribution may only be 25% and you can spend the money. So we just need to add one sentence, that percent, to make sure that that can happen.
Is there any other questions for?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a
Commissioner
couple of
Yankee?
questions for Julian. They relate to the map on page 5 of this tab, where it shows the ground-based locations on the Wind River Mountains, and it looks like there's 9 or 10 either active or new generation locations on the west side of the range, and only one ground-based location on the west side of the range of Enterprise. Is there a like atmospheric or geological, geographical reason for that? And then I have a second part of the question is there any airborne cloud seeding going on the Wind River Range?
Mr. Chairman, there is no aerial cloud seeding in this project, in this area, in this target area. The map that you're looking at, you are correct. We actually moved the 2 purple generators at the southernmost to where the green snowflakes are. The generator on the east side of the mountain range is called Enterprise. We have one over there to capture late fall and early spring storms where the direction comes out of the east and the northeast. Yep. And typically that generator, if that generator is running, it's usually the only one running because it's the only opportunity based on the type of storm. This past winter, it was used 12 times for 12 events, which is the most that it's ever been used. And this past year, we had a lot of storms coming out of that direction. So we think there's value in keeping that generator on that side, but we do just have one there because of it's not used as often as the others.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hicks?
I can't help myself. You all know that I love cloud seeding in the Wind River range, but Julie, I'm not going to belabor the fact that we're allocated 14%. We don't use all of that water that we're allocated to. So, you know, you say, well, where's the surplus water going? Well, we're not using it in Wyoming, so it's obviously running downstream because we don't use all that we're appropriated. Somewhere in the neighborhood on a good hydrological year, maybe 400,000 acre feet of water runs out of the Green River Basin. The state of Wyoming is entitled to use. On a dry year, it's still 180,000 acre feet of water we're not using. And so we're entitled to 14%. We don't even use that. And I understand the discussion about, you know, the whole implications to the Colorado, but where is all that water that we're not using end up? Well, it's obviously not making it to Lake Powell because on some years we'd see 400,000 acre feet of water that we were entitled to and didn't get to use. So it's being used in the system someplace. And this has always been my concern with cloud seeding and the winds. Is the fact is we're subsidizing the state of Colorado because it's not making it to Lake Powell. So if that 400,000 acre feet isn't making it and somebody's using it and we're paying and we're participating in this project for some reason with the idea that it might be help curtailment issue or drought mitigation, I'm just not a big, that argument doesn't weigh out if the water doesn't show up. I think we should probably keep working with these folks. I'm not in favor of increasing the size of the budget, you know, particularly in the winds, because the other side of the equation is we have water right now in Fontenelle Reservoir that we contract 121,000 acre feet. We only subcontract out, what is it, 48 or 49,000, something in the 40s. So there's more than adequate supply for the Green River Rock Springs Joint Power Plug, for the Troner industry, for Pacific Corp and all these industries. And so I continue to question the validity of this program, and I don't think we ought to discontinue it, but I do think our lower basin partners that are generating and deriving almost all of the benefit from the program ought to pay more for it. That's honestly, if I can't go down to Colorado, so here's the other thing, and it always bothers me with the write-up. So we help justify the program. So when we go to page 2 and we read, but Wyoming's contribution continues to be below 14% of all costs in the upper cloud basin. Well, that's probably true, but we have to understand the nature of where the cloud seeding comes from. Most of those other entities that are cloud seeding and the largest participants are the ski industry. And they derive an economic benefit from cloud seeding or they wouldn't do it. Colorado and Utah's major contributors to cloud seeding has historically, it may not be today, but historically been the ski industry because they generate an economic benefit from it. And I continually struggle with what is the economic benefit to Wyoming given the cost of cloud seeding. I don't know what the latest numbers are, but I think the last ones that you provided was somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 to $28 an acre foot a couple of years ago. I don't think we ought to discontinue the program, but I am certainly not in favor of expanding it to subsidize somebody downstream that's not helping us one iota on any future curtailment on the Colorado River system. So again, that's always been my concern. It's a hard sell in the Senate. So anyway, just my thoughts, Mr. Chairman, and just something, think about as we move forward with the program.
Thank you. Director Gephardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there are no other questions on this project, did somebody have a question?
Representative Eklund.
We do need an explanation as to why 2 more generators would increase the snowpack, because we've been told that the airplanes target the storms better because they're mobile. And so in your report, we need to know that. And maybe an explanation of how much water we're sending over Lee's Ferry and where that's at. Because that tends to be, not wanting to argue with the senator down there, but that tends to be the crux of the whole thing is how much water we put over that point in time. 14% doesn't make any difference. And I guess an explanation of that. And maybe even a little bit of an overview, Barry would be able to help with that on how we've proven using the 2 mountain range, Sierra Madre and the Snowy Range, have proven that it does increase snowpack. But those would be 3 things, I guess, it would be helpful. Because the debate is just so much fun at the House every time you get to cloud seeding, and it's robust, and it's usually like a 12 to 38 in favor of passing the thing on through it. But that is I'd rather not spend an hour and a half or 2 hours debating it. And just find 2 more generators may be difficult.
Mr. Chairman, I can address the first question, and then the second question, I think you might get some answers when I talk about the next recommendation. There is a benefit to having ground-based generators over aircraft. One particular situation is that the aircraft is limited to fuel capacity, pilot time, usually 4 to 6 hour flights before they have to land. They're out of flares, they're out of fuel. Generators you can run for 24 plus hours. So depending on the weather conditions, sometimes ground-based generators can be better for the situation, particularly because you can run them for longer periods of time. But you are correct, with an aircraft, you can target, you can go to where you need to go within the cloud versus the ground-based generator where you have to wait for that cloud to come over that one point.
Thank you. I have a question for you. You move those two generators more to the northwest there on the west side of the Rockies there. Is that due to the fact that it's the jet stream comes that way constantly, so it'll push it over the mountains? Is that what that is?
Yes, partly. So actually, I should have put a graph on here. We have a graph that shows that those two purple sites are really used infrequently. And we needed to fill in the gaps between the Green River generator and the Boulder Lake generator, because you are correct, the westerly and the northwesterly prevailing winds will provide a lot more opportunity. So we decided to move those two up in that area for that reason, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment, that might,
Mr.
a comment that may help the House and the Senate understand, the need for the Wind River program. And maybe just to ask the Joint Powers Board, Rocky Mountain Power, and the Trona Industry to provide a letter of why they are contributing to this program. So we at least have the industry's perspective on why they believe that is important. Thank you.
If that's all, then can move forward.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we said it a couple of times. We'll talk about it. We're going to talk about it. The questions that we heard right here is, what's the benefit? How much snow does this make? This was a discussion that occurred last year when we were having the same presentations in November. And the question was how much snow does it make and what's the cost? So the result of that is a recommendation. Again, this is a WDO recommendation, is to do an assessment that looks at the hydrology generated from our cloud seeding program in the Medbo Sierra Madre mountain ranges. So this would be a study that we would perform, and I will let Julie describe it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as Director Gebhardt said, we've been operating this type of technology for many years and have not done any type of follow-up validation on whether or not it's worth justifying continuing to spend money in this area. This question comes up every year, and producing more data and verification that our operations is in fact producing more yield in springtime stream flow as compared to what was projected in all of the research and the design studies that our office has done. So what we would like to do is develop a scope of work for a retrospective evaluation. This would be for looking at the target areas of the Sierra Madres and the Medicine Bow Mountain Range, and looking at our past aerial operations. So including the winter that we're going into right now, looking back at 4 years, looking at all of the observational data that we have, and we would need to have some type of modeling in parallel to that to look at the impacts and benefits of operational cloud seeding activities in that specific area. And again, thinking, that it's important to look back at what we've already done and try to assess our previous operations in tandem with the new modeling that has come out over the past 5 years. We've had limited assessments in the past, just our research studies and design studies. We've never done this type of cost benefit analysis before in this area, where we're looking at actual operational parameters of our program as opposed to the more strict parameters that are used for research. Yeah, I think that was everything I had in my notes here.
I would just add that in the recommendations, and these have been in past recommendations as well. But under tab S2, we've used the information that was developed in the pilot program to kind of estimate how much snowfall that is contributed to by this program. And we've always used 12,000 acre feet at a cost of $11 to $22 per acre foot. So that's cheap water. But now this study, what we hypothesize is that we are actually creating more snow than what we estimated based off that pilot study. So this study is trying to figure out what those numbers really are. It's going to try to answer the cost, the economic benefit, answer how much snow are we generating, additional snow are we generating, and what's the cost of that. So that's kind of what this one of the things that this study is looking at.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, just a question on that. So as I understand it, Julie, it's a retrospect. So we're going to go back and look at existing data. It's not something we'll be analyzing this year or next year as we implement a seeding program. It's looking back.
Mr. Chairman, yes. So looking back, our aerial program started winter of 2018. And by the time that this study begins, the season that we're going into will likely be over. And so we'll have a fourth year of some data and observations from the aircraft and radar and all of those parameters.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, I'm just curious. I'm assuming you use SNOWTEL data is really the only quantifiable data out there. And as part of the study, there's not a lot of SNOWTEL sites out there. So I'm just curious if that's what we're going to use, is there enough data to generate results? You're going to have very small data sets.
Mr. Chairman, you're correct. So there were two different ways that we could go with this type of cost benefit analysis, this type of evaluation. One was a retrospective evaluation, looking back at as much observational data as we have. A couple of the other things beside the SNOWTELs and radar data, the aircraft that flies has a ton of instruments. They have data on liquid water in the cloud, wind, temperature, icing. So we do have a pretty hefty data set from the aircraft, but looking back is important, but it would have to be paralleled with some modeling in order to get the type of answers that we need. The other option that we had thought about was looking forward, which would be a lot more money, but it would allow us to set up exactly the observational network that we would need. But this one we felt is important to look back and see what we've been doing. Is it working the way we had hoped?
Mr. Chairman, just one follow-up question.
Senator.
So do you anticipate using, it's one thing to use SNOWTEL data, but we're most interested is actually getting water down to where the water users are at. So how do you integrate stream gauging in? May accumulate snow up here, but given certain circumstances, it may never make it down here through evaporation or percolation. How do you intend to correlate that using any gauging data that is actually ended up in the creek someplace?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I have exactly the right answer because I don't know exactly how that would be done, but I do know that we would need to use hydrological modeling in order to help get those types of answers specifically on the stream flow, but we would be able to use the real-time data that was collected to help kind of get answers with those two things working together. But the stream flow would probably be heavy in the hydrological modeling, which has come a long way since our pilot study. So it's going to be a little bit of both. It is my understanding without having any type of proposals at this point.
Mr. Chairman, I would also add that I think we'll benefit greatly from additional studies that were done outside of our state. There's been a lot of new programs developed, a lot of new study. So we'll be utilizing new technology, new modeling, I believe, benefiting from what other states are doing with their analysis as well to inform our planned project as well. So every day we get more information and we're trying to use all the information that's been developed, not just in our state, but everywhere.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Nyman. Sorry.
Curiosity question. You would have in-stream flow information based on, and I'm just going off of what I deal with up at home. I have the water, the Board of Controls up there, and they have monitors in the creek. And they start them early in the spring. Would you happen to have any historical data on any streams that were flowing previous to the cloud seeding? I mean, just from the standpoint of monitoring them for irrigation purposes? Because I know we can go back in our country up there and have, you know, decades worth of information on average flows through the course of the year. Would any of that information be available on any of these streams? I don't know a lot about what's in that area and what's information is available, but do you have history on any of these streams, and could that be used to justify or not justify this information or this expense?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that we do. I don't really know 100%, but I believe that we do have historical data in that capacity that we could use as part of this potential study.
I have a question for you. The water data that he's talking, that Representative Nyman's talking about is through the USGS, right? Isn't that what they have? They're the ones that have them flow monitoring sites, right?
Mr. Chairman, SEO typically has sites, USGS has sites. I don't know off the top of my head what is available in this area. Whether it's a robust set of gauges or not, I don't know, but certainly something that would be used in these analyses. The available information that is out there, yes.
Just one thought as we get into this, and it's going to complicate the data. So I just want to get it out there right now. We just burned 170,000 acres of the snowy range where there's snow till sites, and we've been seeded, which has a potential to generate way more water than the cloud seeding does. And so I just want to get that on the record that it's going to be very difficult in some of those to be able to mine that data and make any significant analysis, given the fact of that change in the hydrological condition with that Mullen fire that burned through there. So as you move forward with the experimental design, you may want to eliminate stuff on that area down there, because it will change even on the snow tills, because the wind scour and all of the other things that go on associated with that may have a significant deviation in the data as a result of that. So just something to think about. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah,
or
Mr.
comments?
Chairman, I just have one quick comment. Outside of our agreement with the lower states, have we offered to do more cloud seeding if they paid for the total cost of it? In other words, I'm saying that if it's helping, and if there's an area that they would want to pay for outside of our agreement, I wouldn't match that percentage rate. But would they have interest in additional seeding? The Southern Pack, which is the 3 states, I guess, Arizona, California, and Nevada, correct?
I'll try. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Sucre, I think what you're asking is, are we asking people to enlarge our program for their contribution? So we have our program, then anything that they want to add to it, we'll bring it into the program, but they have to pay for that expansion. Is that what you're asking?
That's what I'm saying. Have they had the opportunity, or could they have the opportunity if they wanted to do that? And have we invited them to contribute?
I would say, Mr. Chairman, that I think our focus has been on finding partners to the program that we have now. We probably have not asked that question, but certainly something we could.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, Director Gebhardt, I guess we move on here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those were all of the projects that I wanted to bring to your attention prior to the meeting tomorrow. We'll have many more to talk about, but that was the list I had, unless there are any questions that anybody has on anything else that they know of yet, or we can wait till tomorrow to start going through them in more detail.
Looks like we're good. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Also move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
8:30 tomorrow.
Yeah. We'll see y'all back here.